I bet we've all seen those horses that spook with the smallest things, like a leaf falling or a plastic bag blowing in the wind. But there are horses out there who will walk through fire, literally, and act like it's nothing. Good evening. My name is Nicole Tilley and I'm 14 years old. I'm a member of the Save Mates 4-H Club. I've been a member of 4-H for 8 years. Today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about mounted police. What we will be going over today: the opener, history behind police horses, how they choose these horses, what is some of the training for the horses, personal care, what happens once they retire, and other facts. Police have many ways to get around, like in a car or on foot, but one of the most extraordinary ways that they have is police on horseback. Now, those horses are so incredibly talented what they have to go through every day. Now, I'm assuming at least once we've all seen those horses who spook at the smallest things, like a leaf falling or an umbrella opening. I know I've ridden plenty of those, but like I said, there are horses who will walk through fire, literally, and act like it's nothing. So, how exactly are these horses so bomb-proof? Police horses are also known as mounted police. So, where exactly do police on horseback originate from? You will most often find police on horseback in cities because it is a smaller area and it's also a harder area for people to navigate through with a police car, or just might be harder to get the job done on foot. So, where do they originate from? In 1758, London Bow Street Horse Patrol was the first ever recorded police unit. In 1771, DC started their first unit. In the 1800s to the 1850s, the unit started becoming more popular in larger cities like Dublin, Ireland, and Calcutta, India. In 1871, New York City created their first mounted police unit. In 1927, motor vehicles started becoming more popular in units and shut down a whole bunch of mounted police units. But shortly after, in the 1950s, they realized that these motor vehicles weren't as efficient in some places that the horses were way more efficient in. So they brought back a lot of the units and it started becoming more popular again. And in 1984, Houston created their first unit, and in 1991, DC opened their unit back up after previously being shut down to these motor vehicles. And still today, in 2020, there are many mounted police units. Police also prefer horseback to patrol because they have an elevation and visual advantage opposed to being on foot or in a car. This also is effective because if someone is looking for an officer and they can't easily find them on foot, it gives them a visual advantage to see where the officer may be. And if, like, the person's trying to ask for directions, help, it's just easier all around. Police officers also prefer horses in some aspects because in a study it was shown that one horse is equal to about 25 police officers on foot. This is much more efficient when it comes to dealing with crowds, handling riots, and just basic big gatherings that may be going south. So, how exactly do they choose these horses? Police can use a variety of different horse breeds. They don't usually have one set breed. Most units prefer drafts or draft horse crosses because these horses will be working anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a day on concrete, and drafts were just, they're workhorses and they are bred for the line of work. But there are obviously breeds that they will take that aren't drafts. Some of the more common horses like quarter horses, some thoroughbreds, paints, etc. So how most of the horses that they get are donated to them by people who think they have a horse who's good enough for the job, or people who can't afford a horse anymore, but they know that their horse is good enough for the job. Obviously, for a horse to be accepted into the unit, there are some requirements. Some of the requirements are, or may be, the horse has to be about 15.2 hands or taller. Some units want taller, some units will accept shorter. It varies depending on the unit. Most horses they usually prefer between the ages of 6 and 15. Anywhere between that, some units, again, will take higher or lower. That's just the average. Usually, it has to be a gelding or mare. They won't accept any stallions for a variety of reasons. The horse must have a gentle temperament. They can't bring in a horse who kicks, bites, and lashes out at other horses, because that's just a recipe for disaster, and it won't be good in the long run. After all of that, and if they meet all the requirements, they have to go through a vet check. Obviously, the vet check is just a basic exam to figure out what the horse, if there's anything wrong with the horse, if the horse is carrying any like foreign disease, a disease that can be spread, if it has an injury already that obviously can't be fixed or anything. Just figuring out more about the horse, because obviously you don't want a disease like strangles that can be spread to the rest of your barn, and that will just lead for a complete disaster. Once a horse passes all of that, they will go through a 90-day evaluation and training phase. This is usually just getting to know the horse and getting to figure out if the horse is good enough for the job. Usually this will be basically just sensitization, getting it used to what it may have to do, and what it will most likely have to do and go through. There's about 1 in 10 chance that the horse will even be accepted into the unit, and once it is, they will go on to more training, obviously. And they will most likely be partnered with an officer who can best suit that horse's needs and what the horse needs to be able to go through the training. The police, if they don't have any equestrian experience or little to know, or say the person in charge wants to change something that they're doing, they will usually go through like a 2 to 4 week training of the officers themselves, which is just basic equestrian experience, grooming, first aid, bathing, tacking up, and just all other necessary equestrian skills. Now, these horses are so incredibly talented with what they have to go through, but obviously they just don't know everything right off the bat. Like I said, they have to remain calm in chaotic areas, and they have to learn to remain focused when they're plentiful of other stimuli vying for his attention. These horses need to be trained to remain calm in chaotic areas, and horses are naturally flight animals, so they have to learn to still listen to their rider when the horse would naturally want to run off because they're scared. And they also have to learn to basically just stay there when there's something that the horse wouldn't normally stay there at. Some of the training that these horses will have to go through is basic formation, such as standing in a straight line next to other horses without kicking, biting, or lashing out at that horse, because obviously that just isn't good. They also have to go over obstacles like bridges, tarps, poles, cones, open up mailboxes, just basic stuff that the horse may have to do with dealing with what the horse has to do in its line of work. These horses also have to be used to cars, on and off, and the sound of sirens on and off, and just emergency vehicles, because they can't have a car driving next to the horse and the horse just run away from the car. So the horses have to be desensitized to that. Horses also have to be able to deal with crowd control. So if there's a big crowd, the horse has to be able to push the crowd if it needs to and make its way through. Or if there's a riot going on, self is trying to attack someone, they have to be able to back the people up and deal with what is going on. Usually what they will do for this is they will have a large beach ball or something to represent a bunch of people and have the horse push against the ball or whatever is being used, just to simulate people pushing against the horses. In some cases, the horses have to be used to the sound of gunfire. It's just sadly what might be a thing. So these horses obviously need to be desensitized to the gunshots, because in some situations, if a gun is pulled or if a gun has to be used, you can't have a horse running away from the sound of a gunshot, because that can just be a very bad situation for the person riding the horse, or someone else shooting the gun, or someone else in general. After all of that, they will go through what is known as a stress test. The stress test is designed to figure out what the horse will spook at, and just generally what the horse needs more work with. The stress test is a bunch of just of the stuff it went through training with, such as you can see, fireworks, gunshots, sirens, all that stuff, going over obstacles while remaining in a basic formation and still listening to the rider. Some units will actually put their horses onto a heart monitor, some don't. It probably isn't a necessity, but some just like to figure out more about their horses. Some units will actually put up a CD that is just every noise that you could imagine in a city. They will usually play this CD on loop at night when the horses are in their stalls, which is a place where they're more comfortable, in hopes that the horses won't spook at those noises if they come across them outside of their stall. Personal care. Have you ever wondered who takes care of these horses? I mean, the police officers obviously have their job, so who exactly takes care of these? The officers still have to take care of their horses. It is basically their own horse, technically. They have to treat their horses like it is their pet, which they obviously see them as more of a companion than a work animal. It's kind of like police officers with canines. Some of the officers will be assigned to night chores, so they can still have mucking out stalls, grooming of their horse, and just other stuff that they would do with their horse naturally, just so they can still have a trust with their horse, because that sort of work without trust is basically nothing. Some offices that I talk to, they will have a night stable hand that will take care of the horses or a daytime stable hand that'll take care of the horses in the morning, such as feeding, grooming, tacking, and stuff, just so the horse officers can get a head start to their job. The stable hands will also take care of any of the sick horses or the injured horses and just applying basic medicine and doing all of that. Alright. What happens to these horses once they retire? Mostly all units will retire their horses at some point. One of the most common ages that I found is the age of 20. Most units may retire them sooner or later. Once they retire a horse, they will usually call the original owner, ask if they want their horse back. Then they will usually ask the officer, since it was their horse, if they would want their horse back. And if they would want their horse, and just if they can take care of the horse, they would usually give the horse to the officer. And if they can still do their job. If not, they will usually call a therapeutic riding place, because these horses are so just calm horses, and it'd be perfect for someone who wants to ride who normally can't ride on their own. And if they don't want the horse or they can't deal with another horse, they will usually find someone who is willing to take the horse to let the horse live the rest of its life. Other interesting facts. Most units have about 10 officers, 2 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant. This may vary on smaller units. It can have less, like 5 officers, 1 sergeant, 1 lieutenant. Most police units have about 12 horses and 1 or 2 extra if one of the horses get injured. This will obviously vary depending on the unit. If it's smaller, they may have anywhere from 4 to 10 horses. In some police units, the horses actually have trading cards that you can collect of all the horses or buy. And these horses are everything to these officers. They need to have a trust with these horses, of course, or the job can't get done. Most units actually prefer if their officers have no equestrian experience, because if they won't have to break any bad habits that the officer may have. What we went over today. Opener, history behind police horses, what is some of the training that they have to go through, how they choose these horses, personal care, what happens once they retire, and other facts. My resources are www.wideopenpets.com, HoustonTexas.gov, LancasterPolice.com, NPDC.dc.gov, and LexingtonKY.gov. I'd also like to thank the DC and Houston departments for letting me talk to them, because that gave me a lot of information on what actually goes on. Any questions?